I think we are now ready to kick off today's webinar. And on the current slide, you can actually see what we will be talking about. So we will start with EOS 2.0 and its aims before actually moving to the bigger chunks of today's presentation, which will deal with eligibility, both on an institutional, but also on the level of individual researchers. Once we know that, we will talk more about the consortium. So who can be partners in the consortium? Are there any rules and regulations to compose the consortium, etc. Then I think also an important part, which you're very eager to hear, is the submission and the evaluation process before we actually move to the budget, where we will tackle the various rules and regulations regarding the budget. We will conclude with some practical issues before actually moving on to a general description of the webpage where you can find more information. So this being said, I think we're ready to kick off with EOS 2.0 and its aim. And I think, Isabel, you will tell us more about that.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Gregory. Next slide. I will not repeat what has been said by both Secretary Generals. However, I would like to underline that both F.R.S and FWO think it's very important to always assess a previous call before we launch a next one. So this is exactly what we did. We ordered an external audit and they formulated some recommendations. And one of the major critique in this report was indeed the fact, as already highlighted by the Secretary General of F.R.S, was the low success rate. So we received 269 applications in the previous call, of which only 38 could be funded for a total of 118 million. Resulting in a success rate of 14% and of course resulting in a lot of disappointed researchers who've done a lot of job and efforts to write down an in-depth EOS proposal. And this is why the main reason we wanted to optimize the EOS program. On the next slide, you can see the key modifications. And as already mentioned, the major change is the fact that we have a two-step submission proposal. So first of all, there is a pre-proposal, and after being successful, you will be allowed to write down a full proposal and submit it. Another critique that was mentioned in this audit is the fact that some consortia were rather built artificially. And this is why we simplified the regulations for the consortium composition in order to provide you as a researcher with more freedom to compose your consortium. Another critique was that the minimum budget should have not been there because that was hard for some domains. So we deleted the minimum budget per project and we gave a general update of the regulations to make them in line with the general F.R.S and FWO regulations. Next slide. So besides those key modifications, the aim was really positive, and that was also assessed in this audit. So the aim remains the same. It is to promote joint research projects in basic research in all fields, and this between the Flemish and the French-speaking community based on scientific excellence, and it's possibly in collaboration with international institutions as well. The available budget is the same. It's around 120 million euros available. Next slide.
Thank you, Isabel, for that. There's one very popular question at the moment, but it's a very general one, and that's on the number of attendees. So it's also highlighting the interest of the research community maybe in a way, but just for your information, we are around 900 attendees at the moment. So there will be quite some serious composition. So think wisely when submitting an EOS proposal, I would say. So the next part is on eligibility, where we will talk not only eligibility of institutions, but also eligibility of individual researchers who can participate in what capacity. And I think, Arnaud, you will tell us more about that.
Yeah, thank you. Some of you are already familiar with the system here that we use in the EOS. We kept the same nomenclature than in the previous call. We have still 4 types of eligible research institutions. We have the type 1, which are the universities, the Flemish and the French-speaking universities. We have the type 2. These are the research institutes or research centers, Flemish or French-speaking as well. Then we have the type 3, which are the federal research institutes. And we have the type 4, which are the foreign research institutes. Next slide, please. So for the type 1 FR, which are these institutions? They are the 6 universities from the French-speaking community. We have the Université catholique de Louvain, Université libre de Bruxelles, Université de Liège, Université de Mons, Université de Namur, et Université Saint-Louis, Bruxelles. Next slide. So now, who can apply within these institutions, within these universities? Well, as a principal investigator or spokesperson, you have to be either a permanent researcher of the F.R.S, chercheur qualifié, maître de recherche, or directeur de recherche, or you have to be a researcher holding a tenure-track academic or scientific position within one of these research institutions. You can get more at the Article 3 of the regulations. You can as well be a co-supervisor. To be a co-supervisor, you must be a researcher who have obtained a PhD with a remunerated appointment to one of these type 1 FR institutions, or you could be a logistician of rank A as defined by a decree in 1953, provided that you have a PhD. Next slide, please.
Then, who are the institutions that are eligible on the Flemish side? Well, they are the identical ones that are eligible for the regular fundamental FRO projects. So the universities in the Flemish community, the Evangelical Theological faculty in Leuven, the Faculty of Protestant Theology in Brussels, the Antwerp Maritime Academy, the Vlerik and Antwerp Management School, and the Institute of Tropical Medicine. So who can apply? Well, for principal investigator and spokesperson coordinator, here again, I would like to refer to the FWO regulations for fundamental research projects because they are eligible here as well. Just take into account that the basic is there that a permanent remunerated appointment of minimum 50% of the one that I just mentioned at these institutions is necessary. From a co-super or to be a co-supervisor, you need to have obtained your PhD. So from a postdoctoral level onwards, with a remunerated appointment at the ones that I just mentioned, is eligible to be a co-supervisor. Next slide. For the type 2 FL, there are a lot of institutions that are eligible. That is, in a nutshell, ILVO, INBO, IMEC, the Royal Museum of Fine Arts in Antwerp, the Royal Conservatory of Antwerp and the one of Brussels, the Royal Zoological Society of Antwerp, het MUCA, next slide, the Botanic Garden in Meysse, VIB, Vito, Flemish School of Arts, Flanders Make, Flanders Marine Institute, Flanders Heritage Agency, Flanders Hydraulic Research, and Flemish Peace Institute. Next slide. And who is eligible there to apply as a PI and a co-supervisor? As a PI, you need to have obtained your PhD, so with a permanent remunerated appointment to the ones I just mentioned. And for a co-supervisor, it's also you have obtained your PhD, but you only need a remunerated appointment to one of those just mentioned institutions. Next slide.
Now for the type 2 FR institutions, so for research centers or institutes of the French-speaking community, we have 3 of them, the Centre Wallon de Recherche Agronomique, the CRO. We have the Institut de Recherche Jean-Marie William and the Musée Royal de Mariemont. So who should you be to be eligible there? Well, to be a principal investigator, you need a postdoctoral level with a permanent remunerated appointment to one of the listed institutions. And to be a co-supervisor, you need a postdoctoral level with a remunerated appointment to one of these institutions. Next slide, please. Then we are moving to the type 3 institutions. These are the official federal research institutions. We have a lot of them. I will not go into details. You can check them by yourself. Next slide, please. Next slide. Just a detail here. Cienzano came from the merge from the Veterinary and Agrochemical Research Center and the Scientific Institute of Public Health. Next slide. In order to be eligible from one of these institutions as a principal investigator or co-supervisor, you need a postdoctoral level with a remunerated appointment to one of these institutions. You have to be permanent to be a principal investigator, just remunerated, be a co-supervisor. Now, if we move to the next and last slide for the last type, these are the type 4. The type 4 are any foreign research institution that is relevant to your EOS project. To be eligible from one of these institutions, the principal investigator or co-supervisor just needs a postdoctoral level with a permanent and remunerated appointment as well. Next slide, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Isabelle and Arnaud. We already received quite some questions on these aspects. First question maybe, we will still talk about the consortium and the spokesperson coordinator, but people are wondering from which type of institution the spokesperson coordinator should come. Is it still the case that it's the type 1, or is it also now possible for type 2s and 3s to be a spokesperson coordinator?
Okay, I'll come to that normally in a minute, but here is already the answer. You need to be affiliated to a type 1 institution whenever you want to be the spokesperson coordinator. So you cannot be affiliated to a type 2, 3, or 4 to be the spokesperson coordinator.
There are also some people wondering that whether they should fulfill the conditions at the time of submission or at the time of the start of the actual research project one granted.
Am I answering? Because I guess the answer might a little bit differ from the F.R.S. and the FWO. For the F.R.S., you must fulfill the conditions when you submit, but it must be effective for the start of the project.
It's identical on the FWO side.
Okay, I see. Thank you for that. I think we can move on now to the next section, which will be on the consortium. So we know now who can apply, which institutions can apply in what capacity. But I think, Isabelle, you will tell us now more on how you should form a consortium. What are the rules and regulations regarding this consortium?
Indeed, Gregory. So in order to form your consortium, as I just said, the spokesperson coordinator needs to be in place. So each submission needs a spokesperson coordinator who is affiliated to a type 1 institution. And then each research group, independent of which type of research group, needs to be represented by a PI. And then each research group can have, but should not have, it's not an obligation, independent of the type, they may include one or several co-supervisors. Take into account that each research group may participate in only one EOS application within the entire EOS call 2021. This means, in practice, that your name may only appear once in the current EOS call. So whenever you apply within one, you can no longer be the PI or the co-PI or the spokesperson of another submission within this EOS call. Next slide. Can we resubmit? This is, of course, a question that we received already several times through email or to telephone. And the answer is yes. You can submit whenever you were successful or not successful in the previous call. You can submit whenever you were not successful. However, please indicate the changes that you made in comparison to your last submission. Whenever you were successful in the previous call, you can indeed also apply, but please explicitly indicate in the scientific section of your full proposal if the current EOS submission builds already on a previous funded EOS proposal. And yes, you can also fine-tune or change the consortium composition, that's allowed. However, please also motivate those changes. Why is it necessary to no longer have the identical consortium composition? And we will also not give a priority to the ones that already had a funded EOS proposal. Each submitted proposal will be treated in an identical way. Take also into account that the intermediate report and the initial 2017 EOS proposal application can be made available to the final EOS panel members upon their request, because they would want to take into account how you performed your earlier EOS proposal in order to be able to grant you the next one. Next slide. So an EOS consortium must include at least 2 and maximum 6 type 1 research institutions. This is different in comparison to the first EOS call, where a trilateral proposal was necessary, and here a bilateral proposal is allowed. However, you still must include 1 type 1 from the Flemish community at least, and 1 at least in the French-speaking community. But it's no longer necessary to strive towards a balanced composition between the type 1 in the Flemish community and the French-speaking community. But you must recruit a PhD student in each community. Then the next slide. In addition to the type 1s, you can also include up to 2 type 2, 3, and 4 research groups. So here you can see those building blocks. And then in the next slide, I give you all the building blocks that are possible to build your consortium. In the next slide, I'll give you some examples of how to build your type 1 consortium. And you can see that these are the combinations that were already allowed in the 2017 call, where there was still necessary to have a certain balance between the ones included in the Flemish community and the ones included in the French-speaking community. But on the next slide, you will see that also the following combinations are now allowed, as long as you respect the budget limitations. Arnaud will explain them to you later on. So here you can see that a bilateral proposal is allowed, but also, for example, a consortium in which you only include 1 Flemish type 1, so 1 Flemish university, but maybe 5 universities in the French-speaking community, or vice versa, so the other way around. Next slide. There you will see just some examples how to include then those additional type 2 or 3 or 4 ones. So these are just examples of consortia that are possible. But what is very important, and I indicate that in the next slide, is the fact that the structure of applying consortia should be based on a strong scientific rationale, and that it should be clearly demonstrated how complementary your research groups are. You will see that in the coming up evaluation criteria. It's not just the building of a consortia, it's building a solid consortia in which each group is really vital to the entire consortium. Yeah, I think this is it for the consortium.
Okay, thank you, Isabel. We still have quite a popular question on the spokesperson coordinator itself. Some people are wondering whether you can be a spokesperson coordinator if you go on retirement during the actual EOS project. Is that possible or not?
Yeah, this is indeed a question that always comes back. It is important to know if you're going on a retirement and there is only 2 or 3 months left before you retire, then you should not take the lead. However, when there is a vital period still left, yes, you are allowed to still start. And then later on, we can take the necessary changes. But this rule can also change between FWO and FNRS. It is of main importance that your university keeps on supporting you while you submit for an EOS proposal. Arnaud, you have anything to add there?
I confirm it will be the same on the FNRS side. You cannot have reached at the time of submission the retirement. However, we can find some arrangement if you reach that age during the course of the project.
Okay, thank you. We also received some questions on the research group itself. How is that defined, a research group?
We let that, of course, the freedom of the researchers itself. I think you should look at the expertise that is necessary, because a research group should be part of one institution. So you cannot have a research group with elements or with researchers that are from different universities of different institutions. That's sure. But of course, within an institution, you're not bound to the institutional definition of a research group, and you can include different experts from different groups as long as it is within the same institution. This is a research group.
Maybe a follow-up question on that. So there's one attendee asking the question, look, two people from the same research group, but I think then they mean research group at the university level. They want to apply within, in two different EOS consortia, so in two different applications. Is that possible?
It's only, as already said, possible that your name turns up once in all the applications. So yes, if within one group you have two researchers and one wants to be part of EOS application A and the other one wants to be part of EOS application B, this is possible, but you cannot be part of both. So one name can only appear once in the entire bunch of EOS applications.
Okay, thank you. Then I think I have a question which is more related to FWO. Quite some people are wondering whether if they get granted an EOS project, or if they apply for an EOS project, whether it will count for the number of FWO projects they can apply for, or the number of FWO projects they can have running.
Good news, it does not count, so it is not taken into account in your quota for the amount of projects that you may submit or that you may have.
I think it was already partly explained in the aims, but I see quite some questions on that in various ways popping up on the type of research that should be proposed in an EOS consortium. So people are asking, should it have a valorization potential? For example, at what TRL technology and readiness level are we situated? So what is actually the type of research we are aiming for?
The type of research that the EOS project is aiming for is basic research. So it should not be validated. It should not have an immediate application. It may, of course, in the long run, but in fact, it's very similar to the FVO fundamental regular projects, as well as on the FNRS side. But so basic research, no TRL levels are involved here.
Okay, thank you for that. So I think we can now move to the next session. I already saw a lot of questions on the submission, the evaluation procedure, the evaluation criteria, etc. So I'm quite sure that most of your questions will already be tackled in this part. There are also quite some questions on what is defined as a pre-proposal, what is defined as a full proposal, but just for your notice, most of these answers will also appear in the current part of the webinar. So we will talk about submission of pre-proposal and evaluation of the pre-proposal. And in the next step, we will, of course, talk about submission of the full proposal and the evaluation of the full proposal. But Arnaud, I think you're ready and set to tell us a bit more on the evaluation procedure.
Yeah, so on this slide appears the overall evaluation procedure. As you can see, there are several steps. The first step, and we will come to each of them a little bit in more details later, we have the pre-proposal. These pre-proposal will be sent and evaluated by EOS sub-panels. Then, if you are successful and you are allowed to the second step, the full proposal, you will be asked to provide a full publication list. Then you will be requested to submit a full proposal. This full proposal will be sent for external peer review. These peer reviews will be sent back to you in order for you to be able to rebut, to write a rebuttal. Then the whole package of full proposal, publication list, external reviews will be, and the rebuttal will be sent to the experts of the EOS final panel, who will select the laureates and provide feedback as well. So we can zoom a little bit into each step. Next slide, please. The pre-proposal in a nutshell must be written in English. The submission is the responsibility of the spokesperson coordinator, although it will have to be validated by all PIs and co-supervisors. It will be an online procedures using this platform here in 2021. All the templates will be digital and the deadline is 23 of February 2021. This is the first piece of real news that you get here. Next slide, please. The form of the pre-proposal is made of two parts. The first part concentrates and focuses on the consortium. You will have to provide consortium composition. You will have to motivate this composition using per research group 1,800 characters. And you will have to provide a short scientific CV of all the included researchers. It will be as well a template provided by us, and it should include the 5 main relevant publications for the project. In the part 2, it is the scientific content. You will have to provide a name and an acronym, obviously, the research fields and keywords, a short summary of 1,500 characters, the scientific description of the project, which is really the core of the document, the choice of the EOS subpanel, and some general information about ethical aspects. 2 very important remarks here. If the page limitation is not respected, you take the risk that your proposal will be declared ineligible. And you can see that some items are underlined or highlighted in yellow. These are the items that will be not modifiable, no longer modifiable in the full proposal. Next slide, please. Okay, if we zoom into the scientific content, which is the core of the pre-proposal, we will ask you to provide the state of the art, the main hypothesis, the research approach and key methodological aspects, the leap of knowledge, the expected outcomes and impact, and the references. Basically, what will be asked for an EOS project is to focus on what your project adds, what is novel, and you will be limited to strictly 3 pages, including figures. It will be as well a template provided. Now, the pre-proposal sub-panels. It will be a free choice. So the spokesperson coordinator will be responsible for choosing the appropriate EOS sub-panel. They will meet end of April 2021. There will be 3. The nomenclature that we use here is closer to the one that we use in the F.R.S. This is why in brackets, you have the nomenclature used by the FWO. We will have a sub-panel in life sciences. We'll have one in exact sciences and one in social sciences and humanities. Each of them will be composed of 18 international panel members, and 2 members of these panels will come from the other domains of the other sub-panels in order to ensure a certain degree of interdisciplinarity. Next slide, please. The evaluation criteria are quite simple. First, the panel will evaluate the EOS consortium for 40% of the weight, basically the scientific capacity of each individual participant, then the interest and the added value of the composition and the way you motivate your EOS consortium composition. Then the EOS project will weight for 60%. Basically, we will ask you to provide details on the research ID. Is it novel, innovative, clear, original, timely? And the proposed research approach. Is it feasible? Is it good regarding the state of the art, for example? And you can find any details in the score grid that will be made available online. We'll come back to it later. Next slide, please. In case of an ex aequo and ex aequo only, some non-formal criteria could be used. such as the involvement of junior research groups. By junior, we mean less than 10 years postdoc seniority. The gender balance among investigators, and the level of interdisciplinarity of the research project. Next slide. The question of the success rate for this first step. We will allow a maximum of 80 EOS consortia to reach the second evaluation step. All 3 EOS subpanels will apply a common success rate, and the success rate will be applied on the amount of submitted project per subpanel. And this is in order to allow a balanced representation of the fields in the second evaluation step. We mean the full proposal. If we take an example here, it is simple. If we have 370 pre-proposals submitted, among which we have 120 in social and humanities, we have 100 in exact sciences and 150 in life sciences. It means that the success rate will be 21.6%. 80 places for 370 pre-proposals submitted, which means that if we apply it to each of the fields, the sub-panel, we will have at the end 26 projects to the second step in social and humanities. We will have 22 in exact sciences and 32 in life sciences. So this is how it will work for the success rate for the first step. Next slide, please. You have seen in the workflow of the evaluation something called submission of publication list. The notification of the success in the first step will be on April 23, 2021. For those of you who will be successful in the first step, you will be requested to provide a full publication list, because remember that so far we only have requested the 5 main relevant publications in the short CV. The submission of this full publication list will have to occur 7 days after the notification, with a deadline of May 3, 2021. It is the responsibility of each co-participant. It will be made easy through the online platform, the same platform that you use to submit your proposal, your pre-proposal at the time. The reason is administrative and scientific. We needed to start pre-identifying external peer reviewers. Otherwise, we wouldn't have time, especially if there is a large number of complex projects. Still, it will be possible for you to update this list of publications for the full proposal until July 7, 2021. Next slide, please.
Okay, thank you, Arnaud, for that. So if I understand correctly, the publication list is not part of the submission of the pre-proposal yet, nor of the evaluation of the pre-proposal.
No, what we need is a pitch with relevant publications of each co-participant.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got quite some questions on this part, but there seems to be also some buzz going on some previous parts of the presentation. So I'll briefly start with that. For example, there's still some people confused or there's some confusion on your name can only appear once. So people are asking, I'm a PI in one consortium, can I still be a co-PI in another consortium? Can a research group participate in 2 consortia? So can you maybe once more clearly outline what we mean with these regulations?
Well, the first question that you said, I will address like, no, it's not possible. So whenever you are a PI or a co-PI in one EOS application, you can no longer be a co-PI or PI in another one. Your name may only appear once in all the submitted applications. So for a research group, that's the same. However, we will check it on the basis of the names. So whenever in a research group you have a Bob and you have Belinda, then Bob can apply in one EOS and Belinda can apply in another one. That's possible. But it's not possible that Belinda is a PI on one EOS and a co-PI on another one, and the same for Bob.
Okay, thank you. There's also another question on these research groups. Can a consortium be composed of various research groups of the same institution?
Yes, it can. As long as they are from the same institution, that's possible. They can compose a research group or they can compose several research groups, but you cannot compose a research group with experts from different institutions. That's impossible.
Okay, thank you. I think that's clear. So let's now move to the pre-proposal part. Again, we had quite some questions on selection rates and distribution of the budget over the various domains, but I think the example made that clear. There's also some people wondering whether we will discriminate between, I mean, whether it's a necessity to include type 2, 3, and 4 institutions, or consortia consisting of only type 1 institutions can come and can submit, whether we will make a difference between that, for example.
No, we have no strategic expectation in the way you build. It has to be scientifically justified. A bilateral, simple project that is very efficient, timely, innovative, may have the same chances of something that is very inclusive with type 4 and type 3, etc. We have no expectations. The only expectations we have is that your consortium must be built on scientific ground, if the expertises are required. So no, nothing is expected on our side. It will not be an evaluation criteria whatsoever.
Okay, so we also got some questions on diversity, equity, and things like that. I think we already briefly touched upon that in the criteria in terms of ex aequo. So do researchers understand it then correctly that it can be an advantage in terms of ex aequo, but it's not an absolute necessity, obligation to have a diverse consortium in terms of gender, junior, senior researchers?
This is exact.
Okay, great. I think that tackles already quite some questions. And then there's one more question. Will there be a rebuttal after for the pre-proposal?
No.
No, so no rebuttal for the pre-proposal. So, okay, I think we can then move to the next part, and that's actually for those that were successful in completing, but also in getting their pre-proposal evaluated and move to the next stage, which is the full proposal. And I guess, Isabel, you will tell us more on that.
Indeed, Gregory. Those that are successful in the pre-proposal, they will be allowed to submit a full proposal. It also needs to be drafted in English. It needs to be submitted by the spokesperson coordination, but after validation by all involved participants, and I'll come to that in a minute. It's also need to be submitted through the online platform, the same platform through which you submitted your pre-proposal, and it is a digital template. Please do also respect the deadline. It is on the 7th of July 21 at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Next slide. So the full proposal is composed out of 3 parts. The first part is also the consortium part, and the consortium administration was already pre-filled within the pre-proposal. And now you will see it is also already completed. However, you can change the positions and the percentages of the positions involved of the involved PIs other than the spokesperson coordinator and the co-supervisors can be updated in the full proposal. However, no changes can be made to the consortium composition. So the research groups, as well as the involved PIs and co-supervisors that you submitted in the pre-proposal can no longer be changed. Please be aware that in case of an update, the administration will again check the eligibility, and if some no longer complies with the eligibility criteria, then the EOS full proposal can still be declared ineligible. Then the motivation of the consortium will still be in place, identical to the one in the pre-proposal, but it is adjustable. So you can modify it, but you still need to respect the maximum of 8,800 characters per research group. Consortium management is then a new topic that was not yet present in the pre-proposal. It is a template. It is only 5 pages maximum, and you have to include figures within those maximum of 5 pages. Your short CV of all included researchers was already uploaded. However, it is made available again and you can update it. The full proposal that was submitted as explained by Arnaud on the 3rd of May is also allowed to have an update. Consent forms need to be uploaded, but I'll come to that in a different slide because it's quite complex or differentiated compared to the different type of groups. And then we come to part 2. It's the scientific content, the project title, the acronym, the research field, and the keywords, they are fixed. So you can no longer change them in comparison to the ones that you already added in the pre-proposal. What can be changed is the short summary in layman's term. And then, of course, the scientific description of the project is completely new. Now it's 15 pages, so now it's a huge workload, but of course, it's a 50% success rate also in the second step. Then you have to include a data management plan, and there will be an ethical questionnaire in this part as well. A third part that was not included in the pre-proposal is the budget part. So you can request budget for staff, consumables, equipment, and coordination costs. But what is more important is the motivation of this. We also come back on this item later on. I still want to add that if you do not respect the page limitations, this is a reason for eligibility. Next slide, please. The scientific content is made by the following topics. However, you have some freedom, of course, to shift or to change that, but this is what we would like to see in your scientific content of the full proposal. The state of the art, the objective and the research hypothesis, the methodological approach, the work plan and timetable, the contingency plan, the bibliographical references, and the scientific communication and outreach activities. So be aware that also the bibliographical references need to be included in your 15-page limitation. Next slide, please. The consent forms then. Well, take into account that on the one hand side, all included researchers need to upload or need to agree with the formulations there. So it's a standard consent. It's electronically done within the submission procedure. They just need to click I agree. And the spokesperson coordinator can see within the platform the statuses of all those included researcher, and he will not be able to submit whenever not all included researcher did not approve or give them consent to be included in this EOS proposal. On the other hand side, there are also the host institutions, and they also need to give their consent on the following actions. They need to allow the researchers to access to their premises and to execute the EOS proposal at their premises, and also, of course, the use of the concerned equipment. But now it's different for the type 1 in comparison to the type 2, 3, and 4. For the type 1, there is no need to upload a consent form in the EOS application. It is a digital consent that will be requested after the submission to the research coordination offices of the type 1 institutions, and you only need to validate it by the 14th of July. So for the coordination offices of the universities or the type 1 institutions, you will have access to the entire EOS platform, and you can monitor all the applications that will be drafted both in the pre-proposal and in the full proposal. But only after the final submission of the full proposal, you will be digitally requested to validate, so to agree upon that submission by the 14th of July. But for the type 2, 3, and 4 institution, it's completely different. There, the standard consent form needs to be uploaded in the online EOS platform by the spokesperson coordinator, and this by the deadline of the 7th of July. So for all the involved researchers, take into account whenever you're invited to draft a full proposal, that you immediately start to have a look at the standard consent form, because this needs to be filled in, completed, needs to be signed, and needs to be uploaded by the deadline. Next slide, please. The evaluation criteria of the full proposal. They are quite obvious, and we will give the detailed version in a score grade in due time. So what will be evaluated for the full proposal is the researchers, the project, and then the consortium. For the researchers is very straightforward. We will have a look at the CV and now at the entire bibliography, also the level of international recognition and the main research achievements. For the project, they will assess the feasibility, the focus, the methodology, and the originality. Next slide, please. For the consortium, it's really vital, as already explained when we talked about the consortium, that you justify the involvement of each research group. Besides that, the collaboration, the coordination, and the communication amongst those groups is also very important, together with the work management. And then the complementarity, the synergy of the research group is very important. So do not include any research group whenever they do not contribute to the entire project. Next slide. It's identical to the one that was already included for the pre-proposal. So in case of an ex aequo, the involvement of junior research group, the gender balance and the interdisciplinarity can be taken into account, but it is not an evaluation criteria per se. Next slide, please. So what are then the evaluation steps? Well, in the first evaluation step of the full proposal, there is the external peer review. In principle, there are 4 on-topic international experts that will be invited to write a pre-report, and they will grade each evaluation criterion. We will, of course, take into account severe regulations to prevent conflict of interest, and each EOS consortium as a whole may list 3 undesired experts. Next slide, please. As already mentioned, in the audit, one of the very positive aspects in the audit was the rebuttal. This was appreciated by all involved researchers in the first EOS call. So this is why we include it in the full proposal, so not in the pre-proposal step. Yeah. You will receive by the 11th of October the entire peer review reports in an anonymous way, of course. And then by the 18th of October, you have to submit your rebuttal. That deadline is very strict. You have to reply on factual mistakes, respecting the page limitations of 2 pages, including figures. And you can only submit it online through the identical platform used to submit your full proposal and pre-proposal. Next slide, please. The last step is then the final EOS panel that will take place at the end of November next year. It is an interdisciplinary high-level panel composed of 18 international experts, and they will have full access to your entire EOS full proposal, not the pre-proposal, only the full proposal, to the rebuttal and all the peer review reports. They will make a binding ranking based on scientific excellence solely, and they will also allocate the budget. There will be, of course, a ratification by the board of FWO and F.R.S, but that's rather a formal step. Next slide. There is also feedback included. So a few months after the final results, you will receive, for those that were allowed to to submit a full proposal, a full feedback from the external reviewers, and a full panel consensus report. Of course, those that were not successful in the pre-selection, they also deserve feedback, and they will receive feedback. However, there are no pre-reports of external reviewers, so they will only receive the evaluation report by the EOS subpanel, so it will be more concise. And they will only receive it after the finalization of the entire evaluation procedure, so in 2022. Next slide. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Isabel. I think that already clarified quite some questions I saw popping up during both your talks. There are, however, still some questions regarding, for example, the templates. Do the templates include references or not? The page limitations regarding these templates.
Yes, they do. So the references need to be included in your page limitation.
Is for example, is there already something known about the template of the full proposal, how it will be composed? Is it already available? Some people ask.
Well, as already mentioned, I just gave an outline of the main topics. I think it's very straightforward, so you can already have a look at it. And later on, more details on the score grid and the template will be made available online on our website so that you can eventually already look at it.
Okay, perfect. In the final EOS panel, you already mentioned that it was composed interdisciplinary and then composed of international experts. Is that also the case for the 3 EOS subpanels?
So yes, they will be composed of exclusively international experts. There will be some degree of interdisciplinarity because we will include from the 18 2 persons from other fields. If you have a panel in life sciences, there will be a member representative of the social and human sciences on one side and one representative of exact sciences. So these are on purpose a more focused panel because we want to evaluate the project by experts in a given field.
Okay, thank you very much. In the pre-proposal stage, it was already explained in quite some detail how we would distribute the amount of these 80 proposals over the 3 sub panels. Is there in the full proposal stage also such a mechanism to allocate a fixed amount of projects or funding to the various subfields?
No, there is not. So there is such a mechanism when we go from the first step, the pre-proposal, to the full proposal. However, then we have a maximum of 80 applications and they all come into competition with each other. And it's only based on scientific excellence. This is also why the final panel is an interdisciplinary panel in which all domains are very broadly, in a broad sense, represented only by those 18 experts, and they receive 4 on-topic external referees. So those are the on-topic ones, and the panel members, they are like having only a broad view on science in general. So they are not on-topic experts in that sense. So they are in competition, and then just the most excellent ones, doesn't matter from which domain they come, can be granted or will be granted.
Okay, thank you. I already came back quite some times to this number of times you can participate, but there are still some scenarios attendees want to kind of have explained and for example, there are many people that have double affiliations at multiple institutions. Can they, for example, participate within the same EOS consortium, of course, in various research groups?
Do you mean that They can apply, for example, with the affiliation of University A, and then also apply with another affiliation. That's impossible. No.
Let's say you are part-time affiliated to a certain type 1 institution in Flanders, but also to part-time to a certain type 1 institution in the French-speaking part of the country. They both merge into a consortium. Can you then be part of 2 research groups within the same consortium?
No, that's impossible.
Okay, I think that's clear. So let's move on then to the next part, which is the budget. I think many of you are very eager to hear and already saw quite some questions popping up on which institution can hire which type of researchers and what about the overheads and things like that. But most of these things, they will be tackled during the part on the budget, where I think it's Arnaud will explain us a bit more what are the rules and regulations and various cost categories.
Yes, thank you. On the slide here, you see the basic figures of how the budget should look like. As said many times, the minimum budget per year per EOS project does no longer exist. There is only a maximum of 1 million per year per EOS project. There is still a minimum of 120,000 euro per year per EOS type 1 research group. There is still as well a maximum of 700,000 per year per institution. Very important, the cumulative budget of type 2, 3, and 4 for the whole duration of the EOS project cannot exceed 10% of the total project budget. And we'll see that it's important later, including in this overhead topic. Next slide, please. There will be a balance mechanism, and the use of this 20% balance mechanism that we used in the previous call aims at optimizing the number of funded consortia by limiting the budget asymmetry when we allocate the budgets between the 2 communities. In practice, it means that the total budget of type 1 and 2 Flemish institution and the type 1 and 2 French-speaking institution, these budgets cannot differ from more than 20% of the total consortium budget. Next slide, please. There are the usual, very classical cost categories. And the first one is the staff, obviously. You can hire scientific or technical staff. We will ask you real cost, or as much as you can best estimate. You will have for that to pay attention to the employment contract and type of grants. The remunerated PIs and co-supervisors cannot be paid on the EOS project. The cost transfer from staff to consumable and vice versa are allowed. The cost will be eligible for staff up to 2 years after the end of the contract date. And this is new. It used to be 1 year in the previous EOS call. Then you will have to apply the code of conduct for the recruitment of research staff. Next slide, please. Then you have the consumables. These are designed for the execution of the EOS project. The small equipment can be considered as consumable up to 20,000 euros. A maximum of 5% of the EOS budget could be allocated for the coordination cost only to the coordinator spokesperson. Travel costs are eligible, open access publication costs are eligible, and these costs are eligible up to 2 years after the end of the project. Next slide, please. The equipment, again, this is for the strict execution of the EOS project. There is a maximum of 150 kilo euros per type 1, 2 or 3 research groups per EOS project. There is an overall maximum of 300,000 euros per EOS consortium. There is no equipment purchase allowed for the type 4. And no cost is accepted after the end of the EOS project for the equipment. Now, next slide, please. The overheads. For the type 1, 2, and 3 host institution, the overheads will be paid to the institutions directly. So the researcher should not apply for this in the EOS applications. What they have to request in the application are effective cost for research. Now for type 4 host institution. The overheads can be requested and negotiated in the EOS application with the type 1 of the spokesperson coordinator. In practice, it means that the spokesperson coordinator should talk, negotiate with the type 4 institution if they want to request overheads, because these have to be claimed in advance within the application. So it will be part of the 10% that I said previously for type 2, 3, and 4 institutions. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is a basic one, obviously. Any budget that is requested in the frame of the EOS must be duly justified, because the panel will have a look at these justifications. I think we're ready to take some questions here. Next
Great,
slide,
thank you, Arno. We indeed got some questions on the budget. So people are wondering, for example, so they hand in a budget, a project get granted, they have a total sum for staff and consumables, for example. If these budgets are interchangeable, for example, if they're hiring, for example, a postdoc which is more expensive, but they've budgeted a lower amount. So is there any flexibility in the budget, for example, for that?
You mean for cost transfer, or if you save because you have a cheaper expenses than expected?
Yeah, I think the question boils down to the fact: do we see the total of consumables and staff as a lump sum, or is it really a strict division between these two cost categories?
No, you can make some transfer. You will have on the F.R.S side to notify the F.R.S, but you can make these transfer.
Okay, that's very good to hear. We already received some questions on type 4 as well. Not maybe related to the budget, but I'm just going to group all the questions on type 4. Is there any criteria that these institutions should fulfill? Is there a particular list available? What type of institutions are we aiming for when it comes to type 4, for example?
No, there is no criteria. There is no list. It has to make sense on the scientific standpoint.
Okay. And the costs they can claim, are they the same as for the typical Flemish, French-speaking institutions, federal institutions?
So, as I said, for the consumable and staff, yes, they cannot claim any equipment.
Okay, good. That's great to hear. I think we can then move on to the next part, which are the practical issues. We already had quite some questions on timing and whether we could repeat the deadlines and what needs to be done. I guess this is part here as well. We also got some questions on ethical issues, and I guess they will be tackled in here as well.
Thank you. Indeed, some technical issues. First of all, the ethical and the integrity issues, as national, European, and international law should be respected also within the EOS program, as is in the case for F.R.S and FWO in all our programs. So there is an ethical appraisal procedure in the application available, so you just need to add it. It's very brief in the pre-proposal, but it's very extensive in the full proposal. Yeah, it will be the ethical commissions of the host institutions that will be in charge to screening those questions in which ethical, or those files in which ethical concerns have been raised, and the project or the work packages concerned in which an ethical issue is indicated can only start with a positive ethical advice of those ethical commissions. Concerning the attention for research integrity, both at F.R.S and FWO, we value research integrity enormously. And of course, it starts with the submission of a project. So please, for the researchers listening here and for the ones that want to submit, take into account those research integrity aspects. You can find more info on all our websites. And within the evaluation procedure, we will also notify the research integrity aspects towards all involved experts. Next slide. This is indeed the overview that a lot of you were waiting for. This is the last informative slide here. So I'll go through all the steps once more. So the pre-proposal needs to be submitted online through our platform before the 23rd of February, 2 p.m. There will be a selection by the 3 EOS subpanels taking place at the end of April, and you will be notified of that result on April the 23rd. Those that are successful will be asked to submit an entire bibliography so that we can take it into account to already identify peer reviewers, and this with a deadline of the 3rd of May. The full proposal has a deadline on the 7th of July next year, and then starts, of course, the external peer review, in which we need a few months to perform that. The rebuttal, you will receive the comments of the external peer review reports in an anonymous way on the 11th of November, and you will need to submit your rebuttal on the 18th of October, 2 p.m. through the online platform. The final EOS panel will take place at the end of November. There will be a ratification to our boards in December, and you will be notified by the results the end of December, before Christmas, and there is an early start of the project in January 2022. So this is the overview. Then we go to questions again.
Yeah, I get a quick look again at the various questions we still have pending. Of course, we've got many more pending than we can actually answer during this webinar. Some are also very specific and might not be of general interest to all the attendees. But please, I mean, we have registered these questions and we will get back to you with an answer. But before concluding, I would like to tackle maybe a few more questions. So we mentioned 80 proposals go to the full proposal step. Do we already know how many of these 80 we will actually grant?
Yes, indeed. We don't know exactly how much we will grant. We know the available budget, which is 120 million, and we know that 38 were funded in the last call. So it will be depending, of course, on the requested budget of the highest ranked project, ranging between 36 and 40 projects. Yeah. So we are striving towards a success rate of 50% in the second submission step. So when you submit a full proposal, probably 1 on 2 will be successful. This is why we included this 2-step to reduce the workload for too many people of you.
Okay, I see. Thank you. There's also, I'm quite sure it was already maybe mentioned in the presentation, but there's still some question on the submission. Who's actually doing the submissions of the pre and the full proposal?
The spokesperson coordinator is responsible, and that sometimes the co-applicants will receive some requests through automatic emails. They will have to click a button here and there and upload something here and there. But most of the job, 90% of the job, will be done by the spokesperson coordinator in both steps.
Okay, and I think this is mainly a question coming from Flemish researchers, because when they submit a project application at FWO, they actually submit it to their research institution, which transfers it to us. Is that also the case here?
No, this is not the case. However, the research coordination offices, they will have access to the platform at any moment, so they can monitor the drafts and how many applications from their organization that will be in place. And they will only be asked to validate after the full proposal. So the researchers itself, they will need to submit before the deadline, but the research coordination offices, they can help them out and they can have a look at those applications.
Okay, perfect. Then there's still some questions on the overhead, especially regarding type 4. So if I understand, for type 1, 2, and 3, they don't need to include that. It's something we just automatically calculate and transfer to the host institutions. For type 4, sorry, they have to include it. Is the overhead also 6%? Can it be higher? What are the possibilities there?
It can be higher. It has to be discussed and negotiated with the spokesperson coordinator, because any money that goes to the overheads of the type 4 will not be available anymore within these 10% maximum for the type 2, 3, and 4. It could be as high as 20%. We all know that in some countries the tradition and about overheads are different. It could be as high as 100% in some countries or 20% whatsoever. But the money that goes into it could not go into something else. So it has to be claimed in advance, which is not the case for the type 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, and researchers also wondering around this type 4. They say like, okay, it will be paid through the host institution of the type 1 spokesperson coordinator. What is exactly meant by that?
It means that the type 4 has some costs and the invoices can be sent to the type 1. Then the type 1 can send these funding requests or reimbursement requests, depending on which funds you send it to the F.R.S of FWO. And this will be taken from the envelope of the type 4, but which is within the responsibility of the spokesperson coordinator of the type 1.
Okay, I think that's clear. Some people are also wondering whether we will make the composition of the sub and the final EOS panel, well, whether we will make that available.
We will make the compositions available and public after the results.
Okay, and then I think there's still a practical question on the budget that needs to be entered in the full proposal. Will it be via an upload, or will we provide like last time? Will we provide like a simulator? So how will we deal with that in a practical way?
The budget should be entered in 2 cases for different cost categories. In front of each box, each amount, you should justify why, and then we will program some controls to make sure all the budgetary rules are respected. So you won't be able to validate a project that does not fulfill the budget requirement by the rules and regulations of EOS 221.
Okay, I think that will be of great help to the researchers. So I think we can now conclude today's webinar.